All right. Let's see if it going live there. And once again, I'll just wait a second for folks to join in, and I will get started. Okay. Let's make sure that's working there. All right. And it looks like we have some folks joining in, so let me get started. Okay, so right off the bat, let me show you something that's really, really cool, okay? I'm going to get this on over here, and I'm going to hold it up so that you can see it properly, okay? Now, take a look at that. All right, so what do we have here? Well, this is a pocket telescope. It's circa 1800, around there. And this belonged to James Monroe. And so here you go. Let me get a nice and close look here. So it's a pocket telescope or spyglass. It's made of rolled bronze. Okay, so they would roll sheet bronze and they would roll it around. And here, I'll hold it up. And with polished glass lenses. So they have the polished lenses on the end here. And so you can see the polished end on the end there. Okay. And so here, let me pull this up here. And it's known as a 3-draw. Okay, so this is a 3-draw pocket telescope or spyglass. And they just call it a 3-draw because you have the main body here, right? And then you have 1, 2, and then 3 that comes out. And so it extends it out and it increases the magnification of the spyglass. And I'll hold it up here again so you can see it there. And it works by, you know, the larger lens is the objective lens. Okay, so this is called the objective lens right here. And it's on the far end with the smaller ends, or the eyepiece. And there's that here on this side, on the narrow end. And the observed object is magnified by pulling the extensions and adjusting the weight as appropriate. Okay, so the main body of this telescope right here, where this was probably bound in leather. Okay, because I don't know if you can see, but it's kind of a cool. You can see sort of the detective work there. You see sort of a faint outline, and so a lot of these they were actually bound in leather around this area right here. You know, to make it easier for grip and everything, and you know it kind of looks nice and all that. And there are no identified marks on this, but it is similar to telescopes that were being produced in England around the turn of the century. And so this is very similar in shape. And this is something that James Monroe could have carried with him. You know, it's possible that he carried it with him out into the field during the War of 1812, whenever he was scouting. We do have a letter saying, one of the letters we have of his scouting missions actually says that he forgot his eyeglass, or his spyglass. But, you know, that's one letter. And so he went out, you know, more than once. Okay, so you see this here. And what's kind of interesting about this, all right, is, you know, when people think of technology and they think of the way that things were made back in the old days, you know, there's a sort of sense that, like, you know, like mechanical things like this were really crude and they weren't made precisely. And there's sort of this sense of that. But it's not really true. And I know it's really hard to see from this angle here, but I'll try to go it up here. There's little ridges around here. You see these little ridges? These for the, you know, on the extensions and these little ridges here. These ridges, you know, I did some magnification of these. These ridges are all super precise and super cut. And look how tiny they are. They're absolutely tiny. And so these little tiny microscopic ridges, you know, were made, you know, with these rolled bronze sheet. And yeah, and so people were like, oh, you know, they could do it. They weren't as precise as, you know, the machine made, and it's all crude and everything. But I mean, these are really precisely made. So this is a really fine piece of craftsmanship. And I know with these glasses and the lenses here, you know, they spend hours and hours sort of polishing them and getting them going and all that stuff. So there it is, a pocket telescope, source of 1800, that was owned by James Monroe. Okay, so I'll put this aside for here. And so the other things that I want to show you, and so I showed you its sister set weeks and weeks ago, and this is a different set, but I'll hold this up very, very gently. This is really, really beautiful. Hold this up here, okay? And I'll get it up to right here, okay? You see that? I'll get it up here nice and close. All right, this is a citrine jewelry that was owned by Elizabeth Monroe, and she bought this in Paris. Okay, so this is a Paris acquisition. This is the necklace, obviously. Citrine. Citrine's actually a type of quartz. Okay, and what's kind of cool about this is the jeweler had the wherewithal. If you look at the back of it, the jeweler had the wherewithal to put copper on the back to sort of complement that fiery look, you know. And so it's kind of interesting that it's sort of interesting that sort of fire look to it. And again, you know, I talk about the candlelight. This one really would light off in candlelight and oil light. You know, you're seeing it on the fluorescence, but imagine it in the candlelight, as I've said before. And you can really see this popping off. In fact, and there's other pieces to it. This is actually earrings. There's a piece of earring. There's an earring there. Okay. Citrine, again, you got the copper on the back. And then you have this fella here, which is the tiara. Look at that. So you have the citrine tiara owned by Elizabeth Monroe, who at that point, she was the wife of an ambassador. Okay, so James Monroe wasn't president at that point. He was an ambassador to France, and he was there 2 times. And one, he went in 1794, and then again in the early 1800s. As you could see, again, this has the copper on the back, just absolutely beautiful, fiery and everything. And to sort of give you an interesting sort of connection to this. All right, I'm going to go get this. I'll be back in just 1 second. Sort of an interesting connection. When I was doing the ceramics exhibit, I was looking for shops, okay? I was looking for our pictures of ceramic shops from the time period, which have been the late 1700s, early 1800s. And, okay, so let me show you the necklace one more time. Here's the necklace that Elizabeth Monroe bought and owned and would have worn around France. So remember that, okay? Remember the cross and remember the bulbous nature of it, okay? Remember that, and then I'll show you this picture that I got. Okay. Look at the necklace. I'll hold it up close. Look at the necklace that the clerk is wearing. Can you see the necklace that she's wearing? Same exact necklace. Same bulbous style, the bulbous cross. You know, it's not really sheen or slicked. It's like, it's thick and bulbous and carried over. And this was a contemporary picture. So this would have been, this engraving was made around the time that Elizabeth Monroe would have been wandering around the streets of Paris with that exact same jewel. And so, obviously what that means is that she was very in tune with the style of the time. And as a diplomat's wife, she would want to fit in, right? And I tell you what, it worked. They called her La Belle Americaine. Okay, so let me tell you a story. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story here. Imagine that you are Elizabeth Monroe. Okay, just imagine you're Elizabeth Monroe. You're in your mid-20s. Okay, mid-late 20s. Okay, it's around 1794. All right, you're the young wife of an American diplomat, and you arrive in Paris. Okay. Now, you know, you come from a fairly wealthy family, so you're not unused to opulence and everything, but Paris is something else. I mean, it's you know, the extent of it, or the expanse of it, the sights, the sounds, the new, the unfamiliar things. You know, you're just, you know, this young wife going into the situation, not really knowing what's going on. Now, imagine on top of that, okay, you have the Committee of Public Safety and all the stuff that they had been doing for some years, okay? So the situation in Paris and in France was scary. I mean, for lack of a better word, it was scary. I mean, you know, the United States was a new country. You know, it's not really sure, you know, how solid our footing is at this point. You're a young diplomat's wife. People were being executed. You know, at that point, the Committee of Public Safety was sort of, you know, it was sort of, it kind of winding to a close, but it was, you know, the threat was still there. There was still this thick aura of just paranoia and fear, you know, against the nobility and against the, you know, all the, you know, the hoity-toities, so to speak. And so you're entering into the situation as a young wife, not really knowing what's going on. Okay? People are getting executed. All right? Your husband gets a message, or, you know, to give you some more, in your husband's good friend, Marquis Lafayette, was imprisoned up in Austria, you know, by the Austrian emperor. Okay, so he was imprisoned up there. The Marquis Lafayette's wife was imprisoned in the same city that you are in. okay? And this is one of James Monroe's good friends, the Marquis Lafayette. They met in the Revolution. They fought in the Revolution. The Marquis Lafayette was a beloved person. He was well known to you. And his wife, Marquis Lafayette's wife, was in prison in Paris at a time when they were killing people, okay, when they were executing people, okay? Your husband, James Monroe, gets a notification from the Adrienne Lafayette, Marquis Lafayette's wife. He gets a notification from the wife's uncle, from Adrienne's uncle, pleading to let her go. Now, I can get that as an uncle myself. I can get, wanting to help your niece. So he pleads with James Monroe to please help his niece get out of this prison because he knows what's going on. He knows what can happen. Okay. Now, the problem is that as James Monroe, as an ambassador, especially a new ambassador to France, you don't know what your footing is. And you don't know how much clout you have. And you know for sure that if you ruffle feathers at this point, it could be absolutely disastrous, not just for you, but for the entire country. Okay, so you can't just go waltzing in to the public of Committee of Committee of Public Safety, spewing off demands that they release Adrienne Lafayette. You can't just do that. It would be a diplomatic disaster. Okay? You know that, and the uncle knows that. You correspond, and the uncle understands what this means, and he understands that is, that's something that can't just happen. But Monroe also gives his word that he would help Adrienne Lafayette. He would help his niece and the wife of his good friend, Marquis Lafayette. So, how do you do it? What do? You can't go to the Committee of Public Safety. You can't do a Mission Impossible style breakout, although that would have been pretty interesting. And honestly, they did attempt to do that with Lafayette up in Australia. Some other folks did. That's a whole other story. But anyway, you can't break them out, and you can't go to the Committee of Public Safety. So what do? Well, so you and your husband, you're Elizabeth Monroe, you and your husband, there are no carriages, there are no fancy rental carriages in Paris at this point, and hacks, as they call them, were just unavailable. So what they did was you got together this carriage and you gussed it up. Okay, you made it look really fancy. You fixed it up. You made it look nice. You made it look like a proper diplomatic carriage. Okay, to get it all nice and fancy. You, Elizabeth Monroe, get yourself all fancied up, the La Belle Americaine. You're considered you were considered a very beautiful young woman, and you got gossied up, and you get into that carriage, and what do? And you head in that carriage on the way to go to the prison where Marquis Lafayette's wife, Adrienne, is being held captive. Okay? Imagine the courage it took Elizabeth to do something like that. People were getting executed left and right. And not just people, but people that were of wealthy means. And, you were the wife of an ambassador, of a diplomat. All gussied up in a fancy carriage on the way to the prison. Okay? You arrive at the prison. And you get at the front gate. Okay? So you get at this front gate, and it's an iron gate and everything. And people start gathering around. And they start, this crowd starts gathering around. Like, who's that? What is this? What's going on? What's happening? And the effect that you and your husband wanted to have is happening. People want to know who you are. Who is this person in this carriage? Okay? And the word gets around. That's the American diplomat's wife. The American diplomat. And the American diplomat, America was this new, interesting country that they were really curious about and really interested in. And they loved James Monroe when he came over there. And so they were like, that's the American diplomat's wife. So you step out of the carriage as Elizabeth Monroe, and you stroll right up to the prison gate, and you say, I want to see Adrienne Lafayette. I want to see the Marquis Lafayette's wife, who is in prison. And what happens? Well, the prisoner, the concierge, the warden, this is the diplomat's wife. She's in this fancy carriage. She's all dressed up. What do I do? I guess I do what she says. And that's what he did. So he goes and gets Adrienne Lafayette. Now imagine her, okay? She's in the prison, okay? This is the wife. This is Adrienne Lafayette, Marquis Lafayette's wife, is in the prison. And just before, her mother and her grandmother were both executed. Okay, let that sink in. Her mother and her grandmother were both executed. Here is Adrienne Lafayette in this prison. The warden comes to her door and says to her, come here, come with me. What are you going to think? You're going to think you're going to die. That's it. You're like, okay, this is it. I'm going to die. That's very serious. So Adrienne Lafayette, she gathers her courage. She stands up. She goes with the warden, expecting to die. But what does she see? Is that she sees Elizabeth Monroe standing there, the wife of the new American diplomat, dressed to the nines, looking proper, looking dignified, demanding to see her. And she realizes that she's not going to die, but that she's going to see the wife of a good friend, and with all good intentions. So she's overcome with emotion. Okay, obviously she breaks down. She's just overcome with emotion. The two of them embrace. They called Elizabeth Monroe the La Belle Americaine. And if you ever look at pictures of the Marquis Lafayette's wife, she's a beautiful woman as well. These two elegant ladies clutch hands, they hug, they embrace. Emotion overcome them, thinking she was going to die. And these hardened soldiers, these hardened, prison guards, and all the crowd that sort of gathered around to see this spectacle, these guys are overcome with the sight of it. They're overcome with emotion themselves, seeing just sort of the reality of what's actually happening here. Just the reality. And so you can imagine that scene. Here we are, death and executions for years and years. And then all of a sudden, this brief ray of light out of nothing, this brief ray of light that out of all this darkness, just that one single moment. And the word spreads. Okay, so the word spreads around Paris. James Monroe can't do anything official, but he starts doing things on the down low, right? He starts meeting the Committee of Public Safety. He starts, getting to know the folks. He starts, doing, behind the scenes kind of negotiations to try to get her released. And what happens is, Adrienne Lafayette was released from prison. And she ended up going up to be with her husband. And the tough lady that she was, she went to the Austrian emperor and she actually negotiated to be able to stay with her husband in prison along with her two daughters for the rest of his internment. And when they got out 5 years later, she was grateful, and so was Lafayette, to the Monroes for the rest of her life. And that's a story about Elizabeth Monroe. And so when you see a jewelry like this and you see, the fanciness of it and all gussed up, also keep in mind that gussied up and getting to that elegance and that kind of jewelry was one of the things that helped save a woman's life in an odd sort of way. So there you go. There's history for you. Anyway, I think I'll end it with that. Thank you for tuning in. If you get a chance, maybe give a like, give a share, and thanks for enjoying history. It's pretty cool.